Hi, I'm Mark Regev, and welcome to another episode of Israel Undiplomatic. I'm here in Jerusalem in the studio with my co-host, Ruthie Blum.
It's so good to see you again, Mark. I'm back in Israel after 3 weeks in New York, and we've got a lot of exciting news. And we'd like to remind you to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell. But we do have some exciting news. JNS is about to launch our very first International Policy Summit in April, on April 28th in Jerusalem. Click the link in the description below to request your registration.
Ruthie, we are meeting today in Jerusalem just hours after Prime Minister Netanyahu met with President Trump in the White House. And I know you, for one, stayed up in the middle of the night here in Israel to watch it all live. I'm obviously more staid than you, and I decided to watch the recording when I woke up at 6 in the morning. But wasn't that an amazing press conference?
Well, I got to tell you, it's true. I did stay up all night, but partly that's because I'm jet lagged. But also, it was so riveting. Now, we were all waiting for big news. And even last week on our podcast, we talked about Trump's Gaza relocation plan. And yet, somehow the entire world was shocked at what he actually said in his press conference with Netanyahu. And it's no wonder their meeting lasted for about 3 hours. I don't know, it was supposed to last an hour. It went on and on and on. And I think the entire world's jaw dropped. Mine did. I even burst out laughing. And the internet went wild.
Can I tell you, I found it fascinating because we've heard a few things from the old new president. We heard him say a few weeks ago, I think, not a few weeks ago, but just when he came into office, he said that Gaza has this great climate and it's got this great beach and there's no reason why it shouldn't be a success story. Then secondly, not related to that, he said, people of Gaza should be allowed to leave. His opponents and some people on the Palestinian side are saying he's calling for a forcible transfer. He's not saying that. He's saying people who want to leave should be allowed to leave. And he's said some neighboring countries should take them in and that there should be reconstruction. And now he's put it all together, saying this is a great future we can have in Gaza. We're going to move people out. We're going to, those who want to move, well, moving is the wrong one, allow people to leave, rebuild the place, and it's going to be this great success story. And the cherry on the icing, which I've never heard before, I mean, he sort of hinted that it would become a U.S. protectorate. He said, we will own it. What does that mean?
First of all, he didn't hint. He outright stated it. But it's not that he said anybody who wants to leave can leave. He was much more specific than that. And he didn't say forcibly move them out. He didn't say that. What he said was two things. One is that people can't live there. It's dangerous. There's rubble. It's horrible. And these people have been under Hamas's thumb the whole time, and they can't live like that. He actually said they all have to be relocated so that Gaza can be fixed up, and it should be a hub, like he said, like what did he say? Not the Monaco of the Middle East, or he said something.
The Riviera. Like, he said it would be the Riviera. But here, look, I think it's an important point.
But no, wait 1 second. What he did say was the U.S. will take control of it. Now, why is that crucial? All of these, and this is Trump's thinking outside the box, whether or not it's practical. I'll tell you something. It was such a breath of fresh air for a year and 4 months since the October 7th massacre. Everybody in Israel and outside of Israel, mainly the left, screaming, what about the day after the war? What's going to happen to Gaza the day after the war? And the only solutions anyone can come up with are, well, the Palestinian Authority will take control, or Israel will have military control for a while, or on parts of it. And along comes Trump, and he says, the United States is going to take control and turn it into a booming hub. And it'll take 10 to 15 years to do that, and all those people will be out of there, and they haven't managed to govern themselves all this time, and all these other solutions and plans have not worked. And he said, if you don't learn from history, all you do is repeat mistakes. It was amazing.
Can I say, I want to stress the point, though. No one is talking about, as far as I understand, a forcible transfer of the people of Gaza. No one's used those words, and I think it's very important to stress and re-stress that. To give people the option to choose for themselves where they want to live, and people want to leave rubble and a war zone and a disaster area. It's the most obvious thing. I heard the Palestinian ambassador at the United Nations, Mr. Mansour, say, the Palestinians will decide their own fate. If you allow Palestinians in Gaza to decide their own fate, they'll be very happy, I believe, to vote with their feet and relocate and allow for reconstruction.
So
but hang on, Ruthie, I want to finish a larger point with your permission, without you interrupting me.
Okay.
I think that's crucial. People leave war zones, people leave disaster areas. When things are better, they can move back if they want to. I think that's what the language we should use, and that's my understanding of what President Trump is talking about. What I didn't understand, in part of his remarks, he criticized previous American presidents. Specifically, I think in this case, he was talking about George W. Bush, his Republican predecessor, when he said America made mistakes in the Middle East, we overstretched. And we know he's been critical of both Afghanistan and Iraq, how America went into these long wars. And I'm asking you, I don't understand, what does Trumpianism mean? Because on one hand, he was critical of America's operations in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and now he somehow wants to take over Gaza. Explain to me the logic from his perspective.
I'll tell you, first of all, it's hard for me to get into Trump's mind. I mean, honestly, nobody understands what's going on upstairs there. He's not an isolationist. He says we can't get bogged down in wars. He also said, however, that if Hamas does not honor the second phase of this deal, that more violence will have to be used against Hamas. He said that specifically, violence. Now, it's true, he doesn't want American troops on the ground in unnecessary wars. He doesn't think this is an unnecessary war, and he has released so many weapons and is sending Israel tons of weapons, and not only the kind of weapons that could destroy Iran's nuclear facilities, but all kinds of bulldozers and everything. And that means that what he's saying is, we're not going to have boots on the ground, but we're not going to prevent Israel.
What does it mean to say the U.S. owns it and then not to have response? I don't understand the logic, and once again, I don't understand the consistency, maybe there is none, in the Trump worldview. Because once again, if you are criticizing George W. Bush, who after 9/11, yes, took out the Taliban, or at least tried to take out the Taliban in Afghanistan, obviously it was a failure, for all sorts of reasons we could discuss that separately. Then the operation in Iraq. In other words, there was this sort of Trumpian criticism of the neocons that they are too quick to go to war overseas and to use American power, and I will not bring America into war. And now he's advocating U.S. control over one of the most dangerous...
military control. No. He did not say military control.
He said ownership.
No, he said ownership. He was talking like a real estate mogul. Okay? I think what he meant is Israel will do what needs to be done to Hamas, and that is not voluntary, because no Hamasnik is going to voluntarily leave or lay down his weapons. What I understood from that is Israel will do what it has to do militarily, but America will invest all the money, will build hotels. He said hotels, what else? That's what he said. Now, it's possible it's not practical, it's possible it won't happen. It was a great message to the world. It was a great message to Iran. It was a great message to the Arab world. And it was a message to them saying, really, Syrians, millions of Syrians were absorbed in other countries due to the Syrian civil war. How come the Palestinians, you're going to force them to stay? But Mark, I know you said, no, nobody is saying we'll force them out. You know something? We may have to, because there are many more Hamas supporters in Gaza than you may think. And how do we know this? We know this, first of all, if you look at the throngs of people who came out to make fun of the released hostages and to scream epithets at them, as they did in the first round, throwing rocks at the Red Cross vans. But also, we know that in Judea and Samaria, in the Palestinian Authority, if an election were held today, Hamas would win by a landslide. So don't pretend that are all these innocent people there and they're just under, a tyrannical rule of Hamas. That is more true of Iran. That is true of Iran. That is not true of the Palestinians. And why do you think Egypt and Jordan don't want them and nobody wants them? Why do you think? You think they don't know that the Palestinians turn everything they touch into death and destruction? Because you know why? They don't want to build anything. They could have had a state 100 times over. They're not interested in building. They are interested in destroying, annihilating Israel, and they don't care if they're living in rubble to do it.
So, of course, I disagree with forcible expulsion of people. I think that is not acceptable. But allowing people to leave, and most of them, I believe, will want to leave, because who wants to live in rubble and in rubbish, right? And in a war zone. Having said that, I think you are right on the second part of what you said. And one of the reasons the Egyptians and the Jordanians are very cool about this idea, or hostile to the idea of accepting Palestinians, is they saw what happened in Lebanon. When did Lebanon start to fall apart? When did the Lebanese civil war break out in the 1970s? It was because of Palestinian camps. And in the past, Palestinians, tried to overthrow the king of Jordan in a violent... so you understand why these people are, as much as they talk about Arab solidarity and their support for the Palestinian cause, yes, we can support the Palestinian cause, but let's keep Palestinians away, because the Palestinians, unfortunately, have a history of causing problems in Arab countries that have hosted them, specifically Lebanon and Jordan. Now here Trump has a challenge to convince neighboring countries to host Palestinians, even temporarily. It theoretically should be a no-brainer because, Jordan has hosted, I think it's more than 1 million Syrian refugees in northern Jordan in refugee camps. It was all paid for by the UN and other humanitarian organizations. Why couldn't you do something with people leaving Gaza? But I think there are fears on the Arab side, especially in Jordan, but also in Egypt, because Hamas, of course, is the partner, the brother of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, which has tried to overthrow the regime there. So for all these reasons, they don't want them to come. And I'll be very interested, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in this meeting in the coming days between Jordan's king and President Trump in Washington. How will he explain to him? The bottom line is this: he would fear Palestinians coming to his country because that would threaten his regime, the stability of the Hashemite kingdom.
It certainly would. And, another interesting thing is that he treats them like second-class citizens, even though actually Jordan is Palestine. But that's another discussion. There are tons of Palestinians in Jordan. He treats them as second-class citizens.
He married one.
Yes, he married one. And guess what? If we're already on that topic, the one he married, Rania, claimed that nobody was raped on October 7th. So you know how I feel, what I feel about her. I don't know what Trump is going to say to the King of Jordan or to Assisi in Egypt. Whether this actually comes to fruition, it may not. But what he did with that press conference was make a huge statement. Not only that, it's not only that Netanyahu was the first world leader he invited to the White House. It turns out that the ambassador, Yechiel Leiter, was given, when he submitted his credentials, Trump had him alone in the room, not with 10 other ambassadors. And Trump held a chair out for Netanyahu and helped push it back into the table where he was sitting. This was a warm bath of the kind that signaled to the world that Israel is an American interest, not just an ally, but everything. A healthy Israel and a victorious Israel is in America's interest. This message, everybody went ballistic. What do you think? And of course, the Israeli left is falling all over itself. Why? Because in the lead up to this meeting, every leftist TV channel and newspaper was predicting that Netanyahu was going to have a rude awakening when he went to Washington, that Trump was going to dress him down and all this, and the opposite happened.
Well, you're right in that they rolled out the red carpet for him. And that was a sign of friendship, a sign of support, a sign of, the alliance between the United States and Israel. And that's terribly important. I want to say two things, though. Number one, why is that so important? the former head of assessment in Israeli military intelligence, the man who was on the job on the 7th of October 2023, he said that one of the reasons Hamas attacked us is they thought Israel was vulnerable. And one of the reasons, there were a number of reasons they thought we were vulnerable, but one of the reasons that he publicly articulated was that Biden would always have these harsh words about Netanyahu. This is before the war broke out, yes? And that he didn't want to see Netanyahu, and that Netanyahu was not invited to the White House. And this perception that no longer maybe Israel couldn't rely on its alliance with the United States. True or not true doesn't matter, but if Hamas thought that for a moment, that gave them an incentive. Oh, this is now Israel is weak, Israel is isolated, this is the time to attack. And that's why it's so important today when the whole world, and especially Israel's adversaries and our enemies, see US-Israel relations as strong as they are. That's good for stability, that's good for security, very positive development. But there's also a side that I think you need to think about, and it's what we call in Israel the bear hug. When you're so nice, when you're so supportive, when you're releasing all this military equipment that Biden had held up, when you're saying, I love Israel, you're my friends, it's a successful country, all the, the positive things that Trump said, does that not give him the ability to put the pressure on when he wants to? You kill us with kindness, and then he says, let's say on the hostage deal or something like this, you have to do something for me because I've done all this for you. That gives him incredible leverage.
You're absolutely right, and that's not an ideal situation for Israel to be so dependent on America. However, compared to the Democrats in power, compared to what we would be experiencing right now if Kamala Harris had won that election, there's no comparison, really. The fact is that we are much better served by this kind of bear hug with tons of weapons that we need to protect ourselves, and someone who has our back, and an administration that believes, this administration, let's face it, so many members of it think, God gave the Jews the land of Israel. And not only that, he is really tackling anti-Semitism in America. He's going after the college campuses and school curricula. So yes, you're right that it can come with a price tag. But I would say in this case, the price tag is definitely worth it as compared with anything else we could have expected out of Washington.
We haven't talked yet about Iran, which also came up in the public discussion, and I'm sure it was widely discussed when the doors were closed and the two leaders were talking. But when asked about a military option, Trump seemed to be saying, at the moment, that's not on the table. At the moment, we're going back to maximum pressure, primarily sanctions, and it's clear that we know how Trump likes to operate. He likes to use the economic leverage of the United States to advance political goals. He was very critical of Biden for easing the sanctions. He's now gone back, as I said a moment ago, to maximum pressure. He says anyone who buys Iranian oil can't do business with the United States. It's a very powerful argument, and he's going to beef it up. But he said he wants a deal with the Iranians. He said, I'll get a good deal, not like Obama's deal. And we'll see if he can succeed or not. It's clear from the public remarks that Israel doesn't appear to have any sort of green light to attack on our own, though he's giving us the equipment to do so, which is very, very interesting. I think this is maybe the issue that is going to be the most interesting one to follow over the next few months about Trump and Iran. What I do know is the following. The Iranians are scared of Donald Trump, and that's a good thing. They remember that in the final year of his last term, he took out Qasem Soleimani, the leader of their revolutionary guards. He was a senior leader, a figure in their regime. He was a terrorist also. The Americans rightfully took him out, and in attacking him and killing him, the Americans sent a message to Iran that I'm very, very serious. So maybe when Trump says today, I'm going to talk about getting negotiations a better deal, he doesn't have to threaten to use force because people know that if he needs to, he will.
Well, it's interesting because what I heard from his little monologue about Iran was something a little bit different. What I heard was that he was giving a message to the Iranian people. He said, it really hurts me to impose these sanctions. It hurt me the last time because, they really had no money, and it was good because then they couldn't fund terrorism. And if I had been president, October 7th wouldn't happen because they didn't have enough money. But then he said, it hurts me because the Iranians, they're such wonderful people. They're wonderful people. All the Iranians I know, the Iranian Americans I know, they're wonderful people. I heard that he was saying, I've got to do this to the regime, but I'm not aiming at the people. And that's really an important message. You think they didn't hear it? They did. And I think in tandem with, he said, and Iran will not get a nuclear weapon. Read my lips, it won't get a nuclear weapon. That alongside that, he's sending Israel these, 2,000-pound bombs. What do you think they're for? They're not for Gaza. They're not. Those are like bunker busters for Iranian nukes. So, that's what I heard in that message.
That also dovetails what Israel has been saying publicly. I mean, whenever Netanyahu addresses the issue, he'll talk about that the Iranian people deserve better than this terrible regime, and he'll talk about a history of when Iran and Israel used to have a good relationship when the Shah was in power before the Ayatollahs took over. So that there's no conflict there. I think I've heard from numerous Israeli officials over the years a respect for the Iranian people. And it's actually interesting, Israelis of Iranian origin who remember the time when Iran was not an enemy, yes? But you know what it comes down to? And, I'm paraphrasing Carville, who said it's the economy stupid. It's the regime stupid. That's the problem. There's no reason whatsoever.
It's the economy stupid.
There's no reason whatsoever for this conflict between Israel and Iran. It's all about the ideological nature of the regime. That's the bottom line.
No, absolutely. And the difference between the Iranian regime and the Palestinian regime, as such as it is, there's a huge difference. Okay, it is not. It is a regime terrorizing its own people. In the Palestinian Authority and in Gaza, it's a different situation culturally. It's just totally different. There you have people who, some are, yes, they are terrorized by Hamas and by Fatah and by the head of the Palestinian Authority, for sure. But they're also raised from age 0 to hate Jews, to want to kill, to want to be martyrs for Allah. They are raised on a culture of death. And if you were raised like that, you would also turn out like that.
And the truth is, there's something in Palestinian political culture. It's always someone else's fault. It's Israel's fault, it's Britain's fault, it's the United States' fault. There's never a taking of responsibility. Did we make a mistake saying no to the Peel partition proposal? Did we make a mistake rejecting the 1947 UN partition proposal? Did we make a mistake when Barak put all this stuff on the table at Camp David and then we launched the second intifada? In other words, you don't see, at least publicly, maybe some of them think it privately, but you don't see that it's always this justification. We just had International Holocaust Memorial Day. They had a leader, the Palestinian people had a leader in World War II, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Husseini. And he was a Nazi collaborator, right? He was wanted by the Nuremberg war trials. He was in Eastern Europe trying to get Bosnian Muslims to join the Waffen-SS. There are even are examples of him, having a relationship with Himmler and visiting extermination sites where Jews were being killed. Have the Palestinians ever renounced him? He's even, as far as I know, he was elected in 1949, the head of some all-Palestine government, right? After the war, after they knew all these things. And even today, Palestinian leaders, if you bring the issue up, they change the subject. They refuse to condemn him, which is terrible. Before we finish, though, we haven't talked about the Saudi peace deal, which both Netanyahu and Trump addressed, both of them in a positive way. Trump said it's a possibility, and he's going to work at it. Netanyahu was even more upbeat. He thinks, yes, it's going to happen. And I think they're both right. I think the chance of a historic breakthrough with Saudi Arabia is on the cards. There's a lot in it for Saudi Arabia. It's good for Israel. It's good for the United States. It's like a win-win-win for all three parties concerned. And it'll be a breakthrough. It'll be an earthquake in a positive sense. If Hamas represents the worst of the Islamic world, when an important Muslim country like Saudi Arabia, which is the custodian of Mecca and Medina, turns around and makes a peace treaty with Israel, that is the ultimate, in my opinion, answer to Hamas, and that will encourage a lot of Arab and Muslim countries who have been sitting on the fence to normalize their ties with Israel. And I think if it happens, and it could well happen in the coming year, positive breakthrough. In many ways, we're going to defeat Hamas militarily on the ground. We've given a huge blow to Hezbollah in Lebanon. We saw what happened in Syria. The whole Iranian plan for encircling Israel has been, it's been pushed right away. And a deal with Saudi Arabia is the ultimate political victory over everything that Hamas represents.
Oh, that's absolutely true. But a reporter asked, okay, but what if Saudi Arabia says only if a Palestinian state, a two-state solution, will we agree to normalization with Israel? Now, we know Saudi Arabia does not care about the Palestinians at all. However, it's interesting that the Saudis got very nervous when Trump said, no, Palestinian statehood is not on the table, forget it. I think that Netanyahu, he hinted that if we take care of Iran and we're victorious over Hamas and we do all of those things, that will actually enable Saudi Arabia to make a deal with Israel and not a Palestinian state.
So first of all, Israel has to win the war. That I agree with 100%. Right. And what's the bottom rule in international politics, but especially in the Middle East? No one needs a partner who is weak. You want a strong partner. And Israel has to come out of this war strong, and we're doing so, yes. I spoke about Lebanon and Syria and striking against Iran after they struck against us, and as Netanyahu said in the press conference, taking out their ability to defend their territory, taking out their air defenses. Saudi Arabia is not going to make a deal with Israel because Israel's weak. Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries will make a deal with Israel because we're strong. And so there's no contradiction there. I'm a bit more hopeful than you on the Palestinian issue because I believe the Saudis, first and foremost, will look after their own interests. There'll have to be some wording on the Palestinian issue that I believe Netanyahu will be able to live with. No one is talking about establishing a Palestinian state today. No one believes it's possible anytime in the near future. Maybe the Irish do, but they're irrelevant, yes? The idea of Palestinian statehood, unfortunately, for the Palestinians, has been put into deep freeze. And I think the Saudis also understand that. And so they'll require some wording which will be negotiated, and it'll be a sort of wording that Netanyahu can live with. I'll remind you, for peace with Egypt, I've said it on this program before, for peace with Egypt, Begin agreed to recognize the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people. Netanyahu can do the same, I believe, for a deal with Saudi Arabia.
Well, on that cheerful note, Mark, that wraps up our broadcast for today, and we'll be seeing you next week.
In the studio, and it's good to have you back here in Jerusalem, and I don't have to look at you through a screen.
Same here.